Boats. Fun for rich people. Always a good time. Never a bad time. But for poor people, boats. Always a bad time. Always bad for los poor people. I'm Spooky Maddie, and you are listening to Anomalous. Hi guys.
Welcome to Anomalous.
Our dog is tippy-tapping around here, but yes, I'm Spooky Maddie. Welcome to Anomalous. I studied abroad in Spain. I lived in Spain, so that wasn't offensive. So just so you know, I actually did naturally pick up the Spanish accent. My native speaking Mexican Spanish friends were like, ew, because I'd be like, gracias.
That's kind of funny because I've picked up a little bit of a Mexican accent from studying abroad in Tucson.
Am I the Tucson broad you
that would
studied?
Be correct.
That is so rude. What the? That's fun.
Just a little bit when I hit the words, a little bit of it.
Oh my God. I'm allowed to make fun of the Spanish people, and I do because
we're opening the show with this.
Yes, because they colonized my people. In case you also didn't know, I'm Latina and my mom is Mexican. So
Also German. Uh-oh.
I'm German and Mexican. Wonder what was going on there. How my German family met my Mexican family. No, that's not how it worked.
If they were Nazis, they didn't go far enough away from the U.S.
Well, I asked my dad for the first time because I had been too scared. For the first time in my life, I was like, where were the Schultzes during World War II? And he said they had immigrated to America well before the Nazi shit started happening.
Yeah, 1943, 1944,
No.
They were headed over.
Anyways,
they saw the writing on the wall.
My mom's family is from Mexico, and my dad and my mom met, and it's just a beautiful love story. Nothing wrong with that. My family was colonized. Let's bring us back here. We're Anomalous, and we speak on the topics that all the sheeple are too scared to speak on.
Like Nazis in Mexico.
Like I said, the Schultzes were in America before World War II.
So that's Spooky Maddie, and I am just Colin.
You know what's spooky is that my family's self-colonized, if you think about it. So I'm both the colonizer and the colonized.
I can't imagine that this is possibly the form. Do you have any gatekeeping, girl bossing, and gaslighting to do this
Well,
morning?
I do have to introduce my continue to self-colonize boyfriend. You could say he's just colonized.
So that was a no. Then you don't have don't have any girl bossing to do.
If you listen to our last episode, we're trying to promote you guys to donate to MMIW, which is Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, kind of doing more research on that. We are based in Tucson, Arizona, and Tucson is actually number 4 in the nation for missing and murdered Indigenous people. So it's happening right here in our hometown. So if you can, please consider donating to MMIW. Other than that, we're back. We've been dropping episodes sparingly, but I would say that we're arbitrarily calling this season 2 since we've been taking a little bit of breaks here and there. So get ready.
Get ready. And it's also season 2 because we were able to get Danny DeVito on as a guest role. So that's pretty nice.
So look out for that.
He doesn't have a mic yet. He'll just be talking into the room.
Hey guys, I'm the Penguin.
That's gotta be disrespectful.
I love Danny DeVito. I respect him.
I'm just gonna play the audio of you saying, "Hey guys, I'm the Penguin."
Hey guys, it's the Penguin over here.
It's fun how you'll just do it for me.
So today we are talking about the tragic story of the fishing boat El Fausto. I actually read this on a Reddit thread, which was very helpful on unresolved mysteries.
That Reddit thread is one of the very few resources out there. We pull from that and a couple of other articles, but really most of the information on this is all from articles and one book, all written in Spanish.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot translated to English at the moment.
So that Reddit thread was a big source, and I had actually come across that Reddit thread a few years back, and I just found this mystery so captivating at the time. It is like one of those mysteries that none of the theories really add up. There's always kind of loose ends. And when I first read the Reddit thread, which is very long, like I said, I recommend reading up on it. It was the weekend, and I told my dad, I was like, sit down and listen to this. And I just reread the Reddit thread.
Which is fun because it's the same thing we do with our podcast.
Damn.
So he's getting both barrels on this one.
Oh, yeah.
3 years apart.
He's been waiting for this one.
That's good.
Yeah.
So let's get into the mystery.
The tragic story of the fishing boat El Fausto contains at least 3 mysteries. Over the course of 2 months, the boat mysteriously became lost by over 100 miles, then by over 1,000, and finally El Fausto was lost below the waves. What exactly happened on board El Fausto, and what fate did the crew of 4 meet? How did a routine trip for an experienced crew become a real-life horror story? And, kind of going back to our cold open, if you are a, blue-collar worker or, middle class, lower class, and you find yourself on a boat, you're not having a good time.
Oh, no. As a white-collar man in middle-class America, I think boats would be actually a pretty good time for me. But really, I'd say I'm at the lower level of where boats can become fun.
True. I thought we would be so rich because you're a fancy engineer. Turns out we're not rich.
And you do judge that not really based on anything else than whether we have a boat in our front yard.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm like, where's our boat,
You were like, where's our boat? And then you walked around the house being like, we don't have any zebra cakes in here? I thought we were rich.
That's fucked. But, the most fucked is Cullen won't let us get an extra room just for our dog Creature.
First of all, I don't think that you're allowed to add an extra room to a rental house. And second of all, he already has a room. It's called our fucking living room.
If you listen to us, you've caught on to this. He lives on the couch. He loves it.
Nasty looks that our dog gives us. He looks like he's about to attack us because we're sitting on the couch next to him.
If it's even the same couch, and the couch is very big.
He'll stare at you and his eyes flicking back and forth like, are you going to leave? And he'll do that for about 5 minutes before eventually he gets up and goes to the other couch.
So rude. So, a little history of the ship named El Fausto. I do have a question. El Fausto is obviously like a masculine. Is the convention of boats being she's not like worldwide?
I have no idea. Stories have referred to it being she. Usually boats are she. I've avoided it in the script because I honestly don't know.
That's fair.
Very difficult. I think universally, usually they're called she's, but some countries are weird. Like some countries say fatherland instead of motherland. Like,
Ew. What? Yeah, I have seen it referred to as she. And, we're not here to enforce gender norms.
Is that a new candy from Willy Wonka Incorporated?
Oh, yeah. I love my nerds. I love my gender norms. Maybe it's just like a woman with a traditionally masculine name, like those bitches named Alex.
Damn. I don't know if it's respectful to be like, oh, she's named Sam, so I'm going to give her the masculine preposition.
El Fausto was a fishing boat built in Santa Cruz de la Palma on the Palma Islands in the Spanish Canary Islands. So we'll get into it, but the Canary Islands are an archipelago, or as Cullen told me, that is pronounced archipelago. Wait, archipelago?
Yep.
They're actually kind of close to Europe. They're kind of off the coast of Morocco, but yeah, they're like in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, sort of between Spain and Africa, kind of. Yeah.
So they are closer to Spain than South America.
Oh my
if that
God.
makes sense.
My
What?
mom is going to give us such shit for this. She was already like, you guys didn't specify exactly what Portland you were talking about. Now we're
True.
trying to do like fifth graders' first non-US geography. We're going to get
Yeah.
destroyed.
If there's one thing I learned from this podcast is I'm really bad at geography.
I'm starting to remember back. I don't know if I've ever seen a map that's not in the first pages of a fantasy book.
Honestly. But yeah, so just to keep in mind, it is closer to Europe in the Atlantic Ocean than it is to South America by a long shot.
Definitely.
So El Fausto was 46 feet in length and weighing 20 tons.
It's a big boy.
It is big. El Fausto was considerably larger than other fishing vessels in the area. And because of this, Fausto was often hired to carry cargo, such as produce, diesel, agricultural supplies, between the islands in the archipelago.
I'm sorry, did you say illegal drugs and AK-47s?
Oh
Is that
my
what
gosh,
you said there?
that is messed up.
Anyway.
Yeah, we'll get into it, but agricultural supplies could also include like explosives. So El Fausto was made entirely of palm pine wood. It had a reputation for being extremely sturdy. It was bulky. It was a durable vessel with a top speed somewhere around 10 miles an hour.
It was not a fast boat. Like
No.
most modern fishing boats seem to be able to get up to like 40 or 50 regularly. But yeah, they only had like a couple horsepower engines stuck on the back of this pretty big boat. So it just sort of putted along.
Yeah, and they were kind of tooting along just the different islands within the Canary Islands.
Which were all about 50 or 60 miles apart. So like they're quick trips.
Yeah, and they were mostly fishermen, so they didn't really have a need for speed necessarily.
Well, I mean, like deep in their hearts, they had a need for speed. But technically their occupation or whatever didn't require them to.
I don't think speed helps with fishing.
It's like how I sit in a chair and type on a PowerPoint document all day, but I really want kicks that can give me an extra inch of vertical. You know, I have a need to be able to dunk, but technically, first of all, that's never going to happen for me. And second, I don't need it to earn money in my life.
It's never gonna happen. So don't even think about
That's
it.
legitimately the meanest thing anyone's ever said to me.
Well, you said it first, so that means I'm allowed to say it. So today's story of El Fausto actually isn't the only misfortune the boat faced. The boat had actually sunk once in port due to an engine fire. It was repaired and relaunched in 1966.
Wood palm boat, engine fire. It reads.
Yeah. This seems like kind of growing pains to me. I don't know the specifics.
I'll say it's not a big deal that it sank. They refloated it, refitted it. It was fine. They didn't change the name or anything, as we know you should not do from our Mary Celeste episode.
True. But also, you probably shouldn't be fucking with that boat anyways,
True.
because it sunk.
Plus, it's a fantastic name, El Fausto.
Yeah, I don't know. And let me ask you this. If you do repairs onto a boat and it's to the point where you have replaced every single thing, is it the same boat? Is it the same El Fausto?
That's such a cool original idea. I've never thought about that.
I thought of it myself. I was thinking there. I took some magic mushrooms. Magic mushrooms in this case would be I ate a piece of cheesecake last night and it tasted funky.
That did happen. That was
It did.
Yeah.
I was scared. So by 1968, I'm sorry.
What?
You wrote El Fasto.
Oh, it's El Fausto. Fuck yeah.
It's going El Fasto.
El Fausto is going El Fausto.
By 1968, El Fasto was owned by Rafael Acosta, who crewed the vessel with his cousins, Ramon and Eliberto Hernandez, and Miguel and Viterbo Acosta. So
maybe it's because I don't have a strong family structure going on, but I was sitting there legitimately like rubbing my temples for a tension headache, trying to figure out exactly how this works. So all 5 of these men are cousins. However, they do not all have the same last name. 2 of them have the last name Hernandez. And those 2 guys, Eliberto and Ramon, are brothers.
So my personal theory is that Ramon and Eliberto were cousins to Rafael on one side of his family, and Miguel and Viterbo were cousins to Rafael on his other side of his family.
But what does that make them to? Oh, my fucking head.
To each other?
Oh, I don't know what that makes them to each other.
The point...
I have 2 cousins, and we don't talk about them because they're kind of weird.
Yeah, they never come around.
Yeah.
So kind of the point, though, that we want you to glean is that they were all really close and they were all family.
Great.
All of the men were experienced sailors and fishermen in their 40s, and they had been working on the water since they were teenagers. So that's another important thing to keep in mind. They were very skilled, very experienced.
They were salty, hardy seamen.
Anyways... So Fausto is a Spanish word meaning splendor or opulence, things like that.
Oh, that's very nice. It's a great name for a boat.
On Urban Dictionary, Fausto is defined as, quote, an attractive man with a good body shape, but has a child trapped in him. He is closed about his relationships, past and currently, and is likely to be unfaithful. If not gay, straight Faustos are attracted to girls that are hard to get and have nice legs. They may suddenly change their mind without warning. Lack of personality, end quote.
Amazing. I can't think of a better name for a boat.
I think it solves the mystery right there.
We're going to be coming back to this excerpt a lot because it really answers questions that we have about the fate of El Fausto.
So on July 20th, 1968, El Fausto was hired to transport a cargo of explosives used for agricultural work from, this is how it would be pronounced in Spain, from Tazacorte on La Palma to Frontera on El Hierro Island, which is about 50 miles south. From what I read, this seems like a very common route that they would take from La Palma to El Hierro.
Definitely.
On board that day were Ramon Hernandez, the 47-year-old skipper, his brother Eliberto, who was 42, and Miguel Acosta, 43. So Viterbo actually was staying on La Palma because there was this celebration going on that he was president of this committee, and so he had to prepare for that. So it was just the 3 crew without Viterbo.
And Rafael, who owned the boat, actually owned a few boats, and he wouldn't really go on trips.
Mm-hmm. So the 3 men set out in the evening on July 20th and landed in Frontera on El Hierro 7 hours later, where they unloaded the cargo. So this seems completely normal, completely successful.
Mm-hmm. As long as there isn't a detail, and we haven't seen one where they're winking at people a lot, this seems totally normal.
Or being we got this.
We got your stuff. We got what you asked for. And then just squishing sounds of them winking at each other.
Ew. I was going to say the opposite, that they're we're some fishermen here with fish and nothing else. We got the fish.
Is this going to become a reference to the second Hobbit movie?
Oh, God. Don't remind me of that when they smuggled the dwarves in the fishing barrels.
I've seen that fan art of the elf and the dwarf making love that you keep in your wallet.
Okay, well, it's art. You said it. It's art.
I am actually running a petition if anyone can sign it. I am here trying to get the word art taken out of the conjunction fan art.
Oh, my God.
Fan drawings.
More like fan fart.
Very good. Sometimes on the podcast, you just got to work on a bit for a while until you finally reach the sweet cream inside of it. And that's where we got
elite fart humor. So while in the town of Frontera on El Hierro Island that night, they were approached by a 4th man, Julio Garcia. That's my mom's last name.
Julio Garcia?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Graciela Julio Garcia Schultz.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. So Julio was originally from La Palma Island, but he had been working on El Hierro Island as an irrigation maintenance chief. So what I heard was he had been working on El Hierro for a few weeks at that point.
So he basically jumped over to the next island to work for a little while.
So that day, he had received a distressing call from his wife. His 2-month-old daughter had fallen deathly ill and was being treated with antibiotics by the local doctor. Julio rushed to return to his family on La Palma Island, but tragically, he missed the last ferry there by just minutes, and another ferry wouldn't be able to take him to La Palma for 2 days. So Julio walked along the Frontera docks, asking for anyone who would bring him to La Palma Island. Luckily, he encountered the crew of El Fausto, who said he could ride along with them free of charge. And so, as we know, El Fausto had its main operations and were from La Palma, so they were going back there, and they let Julio tag along.
Nice of them, but ultimately very unlucky.
Around 2 a.m. on July 21st, Julio and the 3-man crew of El Fausto boarded 20 pounds of fruit and set out for Tazacorte on La Palma Island. So, yeah, they picked up this cargo of fruit to bring back with them.
The Canary Islands 1960s version of a Dunkin' Run.
Nice. As we were alluding to before, the crew had made the 50-mile trip dozens of times before, and the weather was calm and clear besides some early morning fog. They had expected to land before 10 a.m. that morning. In Tazacorte, 10 a.m. came and went with no sign of El Fausto. Almost immediately, the friends and family of the crew knew something was wrong. They were very close to their friends and family, and at this point, their friends and family expect them. They know around what time they would return to La Palma, so they're expecting them.
Right. It's all scheduled out, and they know when they're supposed to leave, when they're supposed to come back.
So Rafael Acosta, who, like we said, is the owner of El Fausto and family to the crew, sent another boat along the same route to search for the missing boat. So he sent a boat or two out to basically make the trip from La Palma to El Hierro Island, so they can just see, maybe they ran out of fuel, maybe they stopped along the way.
Yeah, it's assumed it's just like their engine broke down or they had some small issue and were drifting.
Yeah, so Rafael assumed El Fausto had encountered, like we said, some kind of mechanical issue during the trip. However, when the search boat completed the route without seeing any trace of El Fausto, Rafael knew something far more serious had happened. And this is another kind of important part of the case. Something very consistent was Rafael knew these people very well. He had sailed with them. Obviously, they worked for him for many years. He knew that they were very skilled, and the chance of them being so off schedule was extremely unlikely. So he thought that something must have been wrong. So the next day, the search for El Fausto began in earnest. An emergency message was sent to all boats in the area, and a plane went to search. The crew on the missing boat only had 20 pounds of fruit and very little fresh water. I heard just a few liters.
Yeah.
So time was not on their side. Despite clear conditions and dozens of searching crafts, no trace of El Fausto was found. After a couple days of failure, it seemed like there was no hope. So it becomes very desperate, very quick, because they did not have many supplies. It was a super short trip, a few hours, and all they had was fruit, which would be fine in the short trip. But once we're getting to 12 hours, once we're getting to whole days, that is very concerning for them.
If you've ever tried to go on a diet and just do a banana for breakfast and by lunchtime you're screaming in the face of your roommate about how they left a dish on the counter, you would understand that 20 pounds of fruit really isn't going to get you that far in a survival situation.
True.
Which is also what I consider my college rental house, is a survival situation.
I would also say your college rental house is 500 pounds of fruit.
I don't know if you're allowed to say that.
Well, I'm fruity, so it's okay.
All right, everyone. It's okay.
Hey, guys, calm down.
What I said is fine.
Did you know that what I said was fine? So on July 25th, 4 days after they were supposed to arrive, just after midnight, the British ship La Duquesa radioed that they had found El Fausto floating in the open ocean 111 miles west of La Palma Island. Miraculously, the entire crew, Ramon, Eliberto, Miguel, and Julio, were all still alive. They were dehydrated, sunburned, and exhausted, but they did not seem panicked. The crew of La Duquesa was interviewed afterwards, and all of the crew had very similar and consistent statements. And it's very interesting. The crew said that they seemed all right. They seemed of right mind.
The crew was in a bad way because they'd been without water for several days, but they kept on saying that they didn't have the sort of mental deterioration that you would expect from sailors that have been lost at sea.
Yeah, and a lot of people do question whether they did see every single member, whether it really was the member.
Whether there was some sort of language barrier.
What we will say is there was someone in La Duquesa who spoke Spanish.
At least. There was probably a few.
Yeah, and when they were interviewed afterwards, they specifically said all 4 members of the crew were there and were alive. So presumably they had seen all and talked to all 4 people who were on the boat.
Right.
So the British ship La Duquesa, which was well known in the Canaries, offered to tow El Fausto back to La Palma Island. Bizarrely, the crew of El Fausto refused. They instead just asked for supplies and directions. When asked what the issue was, the crew insisted there was absolutely nothing wrong with their vessel. So this, we're seeing a major mystery of why they refused. And I forgot to mention earlier, La Duquesa and El Fausto, they were in constant communication with each other for 4 hours. And this entire time, the crew of El Fausto is like, no, nothing's wrong. You don't have to tow us. It's all right.
Yeah, we just need food, water, cigarettes, and gas to get back home. This really is, I'll say, the linchpin, the huge mystery at the center of everything that raises so many questions later on. But I will only say, have you ever tried to offer a 40-something-year-old man anything? Have you ever been I'll just get that for you? It never happens. I'm not saying that's why this occurred, but that is a pretty consistent trend with all 40-something-year-old men. They're like, actually, whippersnapper, I'm okay. You know what? I don't need your little help here.
That's fair. And, after talking for 4 hours and unsure of what else to do, the Duquesa gave the crew of El Fausto directions back to La Palma. They kind of directed them go that way.
It was just straight east. It should have been a completely trivial thing to get back. This should have been the end of the story.
La Duquesa also gave them a generous supply of food, fresh water, cigarettes, as well as the diesel fuel necessary to make the 18-hour journey home. And I think they said, obviously, I don't know boats. I don't know the specifics of how much fuel they gave him, but they said they gave him enough fuel for full speed ahead.
Which again is 8 to 10 miles an hour, but still. Yeah, they gave them plenty of everything, it seems like, except maybe food. Maybe they just gave them a meal, but also that's fine. The main concern is water and apparently cigarettes.
Well, you gotta.
You've been to Spain. It's impossible to see someone across a dinner table.
Oh my
for this fucking
gosh.
Cigarette smoke.
It's insane. And our teacher, because they smoke everywhere, they smoke you out. Everyone smokes excessively. And our teacher was like, what are you talking about?
I don't know about that one. Did you know that it's fine what she did?
It's that I say things that are okay. Our teacher was like, what are you talking about? This is after so much legislation. This is the best we've ever been.
She says with a cigarette in hand.
It's wild.
And then people go around talking shit like, Westerners die sooner because there isn't a strong Mediterranean diet going on. They say while pulling on 3 cigarettes lined up in between with different cigarette holders.
Yeah, that's the thing that gets me is Spain has the highest life expectancy and everyone smokes. Like, have they not invented lung cancer yet?
Was all of that fine research that Marlboro did actually good? Was it correct that cigarettes are good for you?
Oh no. So La Duquesa watched El Fausto sail off to the east, straight towards La Palma. They were estimated to arrive in port at 7 p.m. that night. Well, all of the Canary Islands at this point were just waiting at the edge of their seat. La Duquesa had radioed them and said, yep, we found them. They're all good. And then they should arrive at 7 p.m.
Yeah. And that news was received with elation from the people of La Palma. Huge amounts of friends and family, like, grouped together, came down to the pier. They watched from like 5 or 6 that evening, waiting to see El Fausto come over the horizon.
Exactly. As Colin said, in Tazacorte, the news was a huge relief. So many friends and family accumulated on the docks that night to greet them and to celebrate when El Fausto arrived. 7 p.m. passed, then 8, then 9. Tragically, the family waited on the docks throughout the entire night, but El Fausto never arrived.
That's especially sad because that could have been the best impromptu dock party in the world. If El Fausto had shown up, imagine the fireworks, all of the cerveza.
Oh my God.
Just going absolute ham on a dock that night. But unfortunately, that never happened.
Yeah, and from all accounts I've seen, they were like super prepared for a celebration, had the champagne. I think that's what makes it so tragic is like you can tell that this was so out of the ordinary, that these people were so connected to the people in La Palma and to their family, cared about them, and were very close. So the next morning, and Rafael was so on this since this is just so out of the ordinary, the search began immediately the next morning. At this time, 4 planes were sent to search alongside many boats. They would begin at the spot where La Duquesa found El Fausto and search in an increasing radius.
And really, there was hope because the El Fausto shouldn't have been able to get that far.
This is really what gets me too, is I feel like they should have been found. They started from the point they were last seen, and then they're out there kind of making like continually larger circles in the Atlantic. It doesn't make sense that after just one night, they would have been able to travel many miles.
Yeah. Well, the unfortunate thing is you have this boat that's able to go like 8 miles an hour. It might be able to go a little bit faster due to currents or the wind. So let's say like 15 miles an hour. It has about 20 hours to go from the point where it started to wherever it is when the search party gets out there. And even though the Duquesa saw them going off towards the east in the correct direction to get to La Palma, really that's a radius of 20 by 15, like several hundred miles. So that creates a massive circle that they have to search.
That's fair, but I saw kind of diagrams of the search, and there were many different planes kind of doing their own radiuses, if that makes sense.
True.
So I don't know. So the search effort over the following days was the biggest at the time in Spain and cost nearly $2.5 million in today's money. So it was the largest search that had gone on, the most expensive in Spain at that time.
They had sent out more than 5 planes, and weirdly, almost all of them were like old World War II bombers, which if the crew on the El Fausto was like seeing the search planes, but they weren't seeing them, that has to be slightly frightening.
That's fair.
You're not going to look up at the bomb base of a flying fortress and be like, oh, cool, they're sending out people to look for me.
Oh, that's fair. I'd be like, oh.
Uh-oh.
Despite the unprecedented effort, El Fausto was not found. And on August 7th, 2.5 weeks since the boat left El Hierro Island and 2 weeks since the encounter with La Duquesa, the search was called off. And El Fausto was officially classified as lost at sea. 2 months passed, and the community of Tazacorte slowly began to come to terms with the loss. However, on October 9th, over 11 weeks after the first disappearance, a very strange report came over the radio. So an Italian merchant ship named the Anna di Meow.
I don't know how to say it. Should we look it up?
I'm not sure.
Meow.
And that's a W for Spooky Maddie. That's a big W on the slate.
I'll take that dub. So the Italian merchant ship Anna di Meow was en route to Venezuela when it spotted El Fausto adrift in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, 1,200 miles from the Canary Islands.
Going down old South America way.
Yeah. And so from what I've seen, the Anna di Meow was like, what is this tiny boat doing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean?
This was actually the second boat that the Anna di Meow had come across that was weirdly in the middle of the ocean despite being a small craft. But the first one they pulled up alongside, and it was just Greta Thunberg shouting at them about how the ice caps are melting and how they're all terrible, terrible people.
Oh my God.
And how she'd kick every boomer's teeth in if she only had boots heavy enough.
I would buy her those boots, okay? You know, no need to be a hater.
You were crowdfunding her heavy boots.
I was. No one supported me. I was like, buy Greta Thunberg
Boots heavy enough to kick my grandpa's teeth in.
Well, it was tough because I had to fund the research to make boots heavy enough for that.
There aren't materials suited to a boot that have the density she needs to kick in every boomer's teeth. Really, technically, we could put some of that research into like clean fuels, but it's not as satisfying.
Yeah, she's all pissed at me because she's like, why didn't you crowdfund reversing climate change?
And you're like, well, I'm not going to crowdfund being your fan anymore.
Damn. So, interestingly enough, the boat appeared to be in good, seaworthy condition, but there was no sign of life on board. This was obviously suspicious to the crew of the Anna di Meow, and so they pulled alongside, and first mate Luciano Acione boarded to investigate along with a deckmate. So Luciano found that the ship was in good condition and there were no signs of violence or serious damage on board. He reported that there was no logbook or no documents on board. We'll see that maybe he was being
a little bit of a fibber.
He was being fibberish.
They did find a couple of insurance papers, I'll say.
Yeah, but the first signal they sent out, they said they found no logbook, no documents whatsoever.
And then they said that they found documents. And then even later on, they said that they found a logbook. It's weird that this Italian merchant wasn't really, it seemed, excited to be helping with this. Like, the Duquesa gave interviews, they gave reports, they tried everything they could to try to help relocate El Fausto after their first interaction. But the Italian ship was far less cooperative. They only gave the report that they were required to make by law. Very interesting.
Yeah, we'll see. At first they said they found like nothing. And then when El Fausto eventually met its final fate, they were like, oh, we'll send you the documents and the journal we found. And people in the Canary Islands were like, wait, what? So keep that in mind. So from what Luciano could see, it had appeared as though El Fausto had become a true ghost ship. That is until he investigated the engine room. Inside, lying face up on the floor and completely naked with a transistor radio at his side, was a partially mummified corpse. It is believed, though not confirmed, that this was the body of Julio Garcia. Next to the corpse, Luciano discovered a notebook. On the first pages were simple calculations and notes. Later in the notebook, many pages were torn out. They found that 28 pages were removed from the notebook. On the last used page was a message from Julio to his wife. Later analysis of the handwriting confirmed that it was Julio's writing and that he struggled in writing the note, likely from exhaustion and delirium. So the Anna di Meow began to tow El Fausto to Venezuela, but one last tragedy would strike. In a highly strange telegraph on October 11th, the Ana de Miao reported that El Fausto had sunk, bow first, tearing free from the towing cable as it did.
We don't have an English translation of that telegraph message, but it really seemed like they were just like, so guys, little bit of bad news for you. We sort of sunk it a bit. It's, well, we didn't sink it. It sort of just, it was gone.
Yeah, I think the telegraph was something to the effect of like, oh, Fausto's gone. It sunk.
Really weird. I think there is evidence here to say, without slandering anyone, the crew of the Italian boat just really didn't feel like dealing with any of this.
Yeah, well, I saw, and we'll get into theories of how the boat could have sunk. The thought is that no one gave a fuck to steer El Fausto, either because they don't really want to be involved with what's going on, but also like maybe they were frightened that there was a dead body on board.
Possibly. And maybe they didn't want to get caught up in the story.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that. So the reported sinking location was 1,400 miles away from the Canary Islands and 1,800 miles from Venezuela.
Just reminds me of when we were up in Phoenix and we drove 20 miles in the wrong direction because our phones were dead, searching for the place that Spooky Maddie wanted to get a shake.
Shake.
Then we show up and the entire block is surrounded by Zoomers on their phones on a date.
Yeah, I wanted a fucking shake. The day did not go my way. I wanted a fancy shake so bad. We ended up just coming home and getting Dairy Queen the next day.
Just Spooky Maddie behind the steering wheel on the way back to Tucson, gripping the wheel so much it's compressing underneath her hands.
It didn't tell you to turn right or left off of the interstate. But it makes you think because, yeah, we were driving into the foothills. It was like mountainous suburbs for like 20 miles. There was nothing but like estates and shit.
This is a good time for us to say that we're opening litigation to sue Apple Maps for exactly one shake each from that fancy place in Phoenix.
Oh, yeah. Well, those shakes will be expensive. So I'll see you in court. So unfortunately, the body, as well as any other evidence, sank with the boat. So the note, along with some other miscellaneous insurance papers and documents, were returned to La Palma. The note contained a goodbye from Julio to his wife, Luz. In it, he explained the insurance available, how to sell their properties, and pretty much how to make the correct arrangements so that they would be able to continue to make a living despite Julio being gone. The note also contained a message that said, "Don't ever tell our son all that happened to me. You know that God wanted this fate for me. Love you," which is also quite interesting and a little strange.
And very sad.
Extremely tragic. That is the ins and outs of the story of what exactly happened to El Fausto. And really what you'll see is there is no single theory that satisfyingly explains all of the events of El Fausto.
Mostly due to the fact that the boat sunk with all of the available evidence and the body on board. All we really have is the timeline, the report of the Duquesa when they first found El Fausto, and the note survived.
It's definitely the case with a lot of big unsolved mysteries that they kind of remain unsolved throughout time because some evidence has been compromised. A lot of times it's because shitty police work. That's redundant. Wow. Oh my God.
She's even able to get in a dig at the police in an episode that really has nothing to do with them at all.
I had to.
Wow.
But there are some major unanswered questions here. They include, could Julio, the one change to the routine, have had something to do with the disappearance and the locations that the ship were spotted? Why did they say nothing was wrong? Why didn't they accept a tow?
She thought about a toe, like a toe on a foot, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like when I'm like...
She's looking at her toes.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if you would accept a tow.
Interesting.
So what did the ripped pages of the notebook say?
And why were they removed?
Was the body found truly Julio? And how did Julio die? Where was the crew? So I think my question about saying the body was Julio, and the assumption, of course, being he died due to lack of resources, kind of environmental factors. I'm just curious, a lot of times when someone is found kind of in starvation, they're like, oh my gosh, like the body was only like 80 pounds or something like that. We got no information about the state of the body.
And additionally, due to the salty sea air, it was also not only heavily decomposed, but beginning to be mummified as well. Mm-hmm. But it seems that the Italian crew estimated that it was Julio because of the size of the body. Julio was 27 while all of the crew was in their mid-40s. And also that the notebook was purposefully kept on his body, which contained a note from Julio to his wife.
Yeah, and it's really just kind of the assumption that everyone goes off of, but I would just like to point out that it has never been proven, really, that the body did belong to Julio. Mm-hmm. So a little background on Spanish history may be important to put certain theories into perspective. And just let me speak here.
Are we going to be sending this to your study abroad coordinator?
Oh, yeah. I'm like, check this out. Did you guys know that I studied abroad? Went to Europe. Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
I studied abroad.
Have I told you about how beautiful Europe is when I went there, when I was there?
I've been to Spain, actually.
Have you ever given a white person a glass of wine and they haven't said that exact sentence to you?
Never. And so that's why I'm proud that I can throw in my own tired story of how I studied abroad wherever I can fit it and wherever I can't.
Technically, the main thing that you studied abroad in Spain was the consistency of foreign chicken nuggets.
My host mom, I don't claim to know her motives, but my host mother fed me chicken nuggets and French fries for every single dinner.
Now, if this is what the Mediterranean diet is, I think maybe I could pull it off.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, I feel healthier already.
Let me get a couple of those cigarettes. I want to live forever.
Honestly, smokes chicken nuggies. You got it.
Got to.
You know what I studied? I studied drinking alcohol and partying. And then I got really sick from sangria.
She got really sick from it.
It's good, though. Try some sangria.
Yeah, she's come back around.
Oh, yeah. So the Canary Islands, or Islas Canarias, are an autonomous community of Spain. So as we stated earlier, they're located southwest of Spain in the Atlantic Ocean, pretty much west of Africa, west of Morocco specifically. Since the Spanish Civil War of 1936, Spain functioned under the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, who would remain dictator until 1975, which is wild. I don't know, since none of you really studied abroad in Spain, if you guys know, it's kind of wild to think that Spain had a dictator until the mid-70s.
And I'll tell you, Frank wasn't a cool guy.
He wasn't the best. So as could be expected, this was kind of a rough time for Spanish citizens, though the 1960s would actually see a large economic growth under Franco. Also to be expected from a dictator, Franco was authoritarian ruler and Franquista society was quite conservative. Pretty much just what you expect from a dictator. If there were people who were more like democratic, little organizations kind of for rebellions, those were squashed. Like I said, pretty much what you would expect from an authoritarian dictatorship. So another thing to possibly keep in mind, though they classified themselves as neutral and non-belligerent in World War II, the Franco regime did provide some Spanish volunteers to the Nazi Wehrmacht.
Yeah, a lot of countries that were neutral they had people go to both sides, but the ones that went over to the Nazis are the ones that are remembered.
For good reason.
Yeah, for good reason. You're on such thin ice, it's almost amazing.
The Schultzes were already in America.
Yeah, until a couple of them shipped back over.
Oh, so rude. So yeah, with a little background, the Canary Islands functioned at this time under Franquista rules.
This whole Franquista thing is making me really suspicious of the Maxinista movement.
Oh no, TJ Maxx, our ruler.
They're ruling a strong dictatorship over low-quality furniture, thin shirts, and stinky toiletries.
No. Oh my God. You're so wrong.
Maddie, you have a gun.
This is ridiculous. It's name brand stuff. It's good quality. It's name brand.
I guess technically TJ Maxx is the name of a brand.
It's no, you don't understand. You're so wrong. No, it's like an outlet. It's like name brand stuff. Okay, It's not TJ Maxx brand. I'm pissed at you.
Just really mad.
So, with those facts to keep in mind, and of course the events that we covered in El Fausto, let's go over some possible theories as to what happened. One well-accepted theory is the crew of El Fausto experienced a series of small issues, and as their situation worsened and due to dehydration, the men became more and more irrational. So basically what happened was, a lot of little mistakes built up, resulted in a horrible tragedy. And this is what Just Cullen believes.
Welcome to the part of the show everyone skips, the theory that makes the most sense.
Oh my God.
I'm a martyr.
A loser.
I'm a king and a martyr, and everyone likes me.
You're a loser, and I hate you.
I've never seen her angrier than when I disrespected the good name of TJ and his Maxinistas.
I'm a proud Maxinista. I'm ready to fight as a Machinista.
I think the definition of passive activism is saying down with capitalism while holding a Maxinista membership card.
I don't have a membership card. Down with capitalism, but honey, I'm in the draft. They draft me to the Maxinista army.
I saw you throw a Molotov cocktail at a Kohl's.
Very good. So, according to an account of an out-of-print investigative book on the incident, boats making the trip from El Hierro Island to La Palma Island would often navigate without any navigational instruments. They would simply head north towards the tip of the wedge-shaped island where there is a lighthouse. From there, they would sail along, keeping the shore in sight until spotting and docking in Tatacorte.
This isn't strange in like the history of sailing. Even modern day, like following a coastline from one spot to another is a very common thing to do. And that's what all ships did for a huge portion of history. But really, even in the 1960s, you're supposed to be checking on your instruments. You're supposed to be logging it as you go along. It seemed like there's a very good chance that all of these very experienced sailors that between them have almost 100 years of experience sailing, they might have gotten a little bit complacent in their comfortability in that situation.
I've also heard, though, for the other side of it, adds strangeness of like Rafael and people who lived on La Palma said it was strange they couldn't find their way back because La Palma is extremely mountainous. So you'd be able to see it. Like you could kind of see what's going on from a fairly far away.
Definitely. And that morning, they say that there was fog that could have obscured it. And that somewhat explains why they could have missed the island the first time. But after they interact with the Duquesa and are sent there and should have been arriving in still daylight, there's really no explanation for why, if they just would have headed straight east like they set off at, that they shouldn't have seen the mountains of La Palma and been able to get the rest of the way there.
Yeah, that's definitely the other thing is that La Duquesa directed them. They said you should arrive at this time, just go straight east. And from all accounts, other than like morning fog, it was fairly calm waters.
Yeah.
So it's possible that due to the fog in the morning on July 21st, El Fausto may have lost sight of the island and continued far off course, growing more panicked, hungry, and thirsty as they went until encountering La Duquesa days later.
I can't get the image of that dad smile out of my head. Usually it's something you only realize years later, but like you realize that you were in a situation where like your dad realized that something was going poorly. Like something wasn't like you were clearly lost on your way to like going to Disneyland, but they just have that little smile on their face. Like, don't even ask me
Do not
if there's something
this.
wrong. I've got it.
Right. And, similar scenario, the crew's refusal of a tow and subsequent disappearance. That is a mystery, but as Cullen was alluding to, could have been due to pride or possibly overconfidence. The crew was comprised of we cannot emphasize this enough, extremely experienced and skilled seamen, something Rafael Acosta would attest to. So maybe they were embarrassed, trying to save face. Just gotta bring up like machismo tóxico. I mean, come on.
That sounds delicious. Where can I get some of that?
Oh, you have it.
Wow.
Wow.
She's still mad about the TJ Maxx thing.
Yeah, toxic masculinity. Yeah. Change your masculinity to maxinistalinity.
Too much free advertising for them.
Honestly.
I'll say, even though I buy this theory, I don't think it's a fantastic explanation that they were just too prideful to get help back.
No.
It's a little bit far for me to buy.
So we will continue to get into if they were possibly not in their right mind. But in terms of what La Duquesa reported, them being in their right mind and refusing a tow, to me, it doesn't make sense at all, because also Julio was trying to get to his sick child as fast as possible.
Yeah.
By all accounts, after getting directions from La Duquesa, the crew of El Fausto should have easily been able to return to La Palma. Perhaps they were even more worn down physically and mentally than it appeared, or even more than they themselves realized, which led to them going off course again. So this is kind of another addition to the theory that makes it make a little more sense, is that they were worse off than La Duquesa had realized.
Or maybe even they realized. I mean, a couple of days with really strictly rationed water gets in your head fast.
So it's also possible that some of the fruit they ate was fermented, exacerbating. Wait, how do you say that?
I don't think that you nailed that one in one.
I said that to my therapist the other day. I was like, it's just really exacerbating.
Did she laugh?
Yeah.
Nice.
Exacerbating.
Exacerbating, no T.
Worsening their altered mental state. It is also possible, I saw the original poster of the Reddit thread said that they thought it's possible they were inhaling diesel fumes from a faulty exhaust system. So many shipwreck survivors speak on how quickly dehydration and drinking seawater affects your mental state and can cause hallucinations. As the crew of El Fausto were all close family members, could be possible that they experienced folie à deux or a shared psychosis. It's possible that Julio, since he was decades younger than the crew, was the last to succumb to dehydration. So this explains that while still in compos mentis, competent mind, and seeing the crew in a bad way, he may have kind of realized that his fate was not positive and written that note to his family. It's also possible that Julio wrote the note in a moment of lucidity, which is known to occur in many situations of altered minds. So then we're wondering what happened on the boat afterwards. It seems clear that the crew ran out of food and water as they drifted helplessly off course. The missing pages of the notebook suggest that it may have once contained a log of what happened on board, but they were destroyed. Maybe this was by the crew, Julio, or the Italian sailors, and maybe this was done to keep the harsher details of what happened from being known.
The evidence of it being a log is that the letter from Julio to his wife really begins abruptly and sort of contextless. It isn't like, dear wife, and then it begins and goes into all of these things. It just starts. So it seems like the pages before might have been covering what happened. And I personally believe that there are a couple people that would have had incentives to remove those pages describing what happened on El Fausto before they were returned to La Palma. It could have been in the more conservative times of the 1960s. The Italian crew read what happened in there, and it's very, very possible, as dark as it is, that the people on El Fausto had to resort to cannibalism or had to resort to violence or infighting, all of which might have been reason for the Italian crew to think, maybe we should remove this before returning it because it's too harsh for the families to hear. It would be worse off for them. But even stronger, I think, if any of those events happened, Julio might have been the one to tear them out of the notebook. He expected the notebook to get back because he wrote a note in it. And he said at the very end, don't ever let my son know exactly what happened here. He might have just made it so that didn't happen.
I do believe that. I do believe that Julio ripped out the notes. I mean, I believe it's more than possible Anna de Meow were kind of lying about what they found. But I think in terms of the notebook, Julio was such a family man. You could tell he just obviously his whole life was his family and his children. I think he wouldn't want his family to read all that he went through.
I won't make any accusations. I'll only say that if my father ever was in a life or death situation where he was forced to eat another man, I wouldn't know about it.
Interesting. My dad would be like, hey, Maddie, you'll find this cool. I'll be like, how does it taste?
No. That's not how it goes at all. The way that stories come out that your father doesn't want to tell is your mom brings them up and goes, hey, do you want to tell that story about this? And then he quietly says, I think they already heard that one, that we don't need to cover it again. And then she starts to tell the story anyway.
Yeah.
That's generally how these tales come to light in front of literally everyone.
Oh, yeah. We'll be at a family dinner. And then she'll be like, any funny stories about your father? Oh, I have one. Remember when you ate a human? So while this theory that, mistakes were happening that may not have included like obvious damage to the boat, there's still really no satisfying explanation of the specifics of what issues they may have had.
And it doesn't explain things like why they refused help. And it also still seems very out of the ordinary for these experienced sailors to have this much trouble.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, obviously we don't have much evidence to go off of, but it's still a lot of the explanations of like why they didn't ask for help.
And even too, where are the other three bodies? These are the unanswered questions that open us up to other theories.
So another popular theory is that what happened to El Fausto was due in part to the fishing boat carrying some sort of illegal cargo. The ship carrying illegal cargo, such as drugs or weapons, would explain why they refused a tow from La Duquesa, as they obviously would have been trying to avoid maritime authorities, probably didn't want anyone to board their ship.
Yeah, didn't want to come back in that way and have someone search the hold, find their drugs and AK-47s. That's called foreshadowing. I'm a storyteller, and I'm sweaty.
He's a sweaty. It's possible that El Fausto had been functioning as an illegal smuggling boat for a while, hence the abnormally large size. Something illegal happening and possibly leading to murder could explain why Julio's note to his family implied that maybe he deserved his fate, that it was what God wanted, and do not tell my children like what happened.
Yeah, it's possible. And to reference some of the information that Maddie went over about the history of Spain, in the decades leading up to this, when this entire family was working as sailors, those were some of the hardest years that were experienced in the Canary Islands. There was crippling poverty. There was just really nothing to go around. So we're not trying to defame anyone, but it could be possible that even though at that time in the 1960s, they were all doing well and didn't need the money from illicit activities such as smuggling, it could have been that that is something that they had done in the past and carried forward.
Yeah, and that's something that's very contentious. It's like, well, they weren't in debt. So the crew of El Fausto did all right for themselves, were able to provide for their families. Like I said, they weren't in debt. Some people say like, oh, well, that means they wouldn't need to smuggle drugs. while others say, well, they were fishermen, so the fact that they are doing all right means they were smuggling drugs. It's important to note that fishing is one of the main bases of the economy in the Canary Islands. So I think that the economic status of the crew of El Fausto, to me, doesn't say much either way. It could go either way.
Certainly.
Most drug smuggling to and from the Canaries came from Morocco, which obviously was the opposite direction where they were going. So the economy in Spain was beginning to boom in the 60s. However, like cocaine had not really hit the Spanish scene yet. So it's kind of unsure once again. A lot of people say they could have been smuggling cocaine, but it does seem kind of unlikely that wasn't really going on in Spain at that time. And like I said, most drugs, like a lot of marijuana, was smuggled from Morocco to Spain.
And they were headed west, the opposite direction from Morocco.
Yeah, we'll discuss another side of the theory that rather than the crew being involved in drug smuggling, it's possible that Julio had convinced the crew to do this one-time run to smuggle drugs or weapons for a large amount of money. Julio, you'll see in a lot of theorizing, Julio was the one wild card. He was the one thing that was different on this trip. So a lot of people wonder if the story about his child being sick wasn't necessarily his actual motive.
I always thought of Julio as the least wild of these cards because he's just like, I need to get home to see my daughter. But I suppose it seems possible. And I'll say, if the crew of the El Fausto was like, oh yeah, bring your drugs on board, we'll just bring you right over, that's a little bit too generous.
Yeah, it is strange. Julio was a complete stranger, too, to be asking 3 people that he doesn't know, like, hey, I'm into illegal business. Will you help me?
Yeah.
First, I would like to mention that his family and doctor confirmed that his daughter was sick.
And they meant sick, not like sick.
Well, kind of on the other side of that, if we're speaking on the crew of El Fausto kind of running these illegal shenanigans on the side, why would they allow Julio to come aboard? I feel like either way, it doesn't necessarily make sense that you would be enlisting a stranger while you're doing illegal work.
So this theory, in a nutshell, explains why they wouldn't want to tow back, but it's got a lot of problems.
True. So they may have planned to smuggle drugs or weapons to South America and plan to meet a larger vessel along the way. Obviously, the ship El Fausto would not be able to make it across the Atlantic Ocean. So the thought is they could have been planning to meet up with a larger vessel capable of moving across the Atlantic Ocean to get the drugs to South America or Venezuela.
Yeah.
Still doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but it would be why they obviously didn't prepare for a transatlantic trip. It doesn't make much sense, but it is a theory that gets brought up a lot because, you know, one of the biggest unanswered questions is why didn't they accept a tow from La Duquesa? It's possible that all this occurred because one person, I think it's implied, Julio perhaps, on El Fausto was holding the others at gunpoint, ensuring that no one asked for help.
A cynical man would say that all of these seem kind of like patchwork additions to the theory that are meant to explain stuff that doesn't make sense with its thesis.
So it's like the ransom letter in the John Benet Ramsey
Here we
case.
go, everybody. Here we go.
Them not accepting a tow from La Duquesa is like the ransom letter. It's the one thing that kind of throws a huge wrench in any theory. If you're going off of that, if you're going off they didn't accept a tow, why would they do that? Well, maybe they didn't want the maritime authorities on them. They didn't want anyone to know they were smuggling something illegal. That doesn't really line up with anything else versus they were just having issues and they obviously needed help. Well, why didn't they accept help?
This is just like the letter in the John Benet Ramsey case or the fact that Jodi Arias was a girl boss. It just confuses the case.
So Cullen gets very mad at me because I speak truth to power that Jodi Arias is a girl boss. Like, I'm sorry. She's a girl boss.
This is your worst take by far.
Yeah, well, you brought it up, so you obviously support me.
I thought that you would fold on it, but I was foolish to assume.
I personally believe that, honestly, the Anna de Meow crew acted slightly suspiciously. It could be they didn't want to get involved, but if we're looking at this through the lens of illegal goods being smuggled on El Fausto, it may line up. The crew of the Anna de Meow initially said there was no documentation or papers to be found on El Fausto, which is known to be untrue. It's possible that the crew of the Anna de Meow found drugs or weapons on El Fausto and decided to take it for themselves.
They did end up finishing their trip to Venezuela.
I mean, they were pretty far out on the Atlantic already,
Yeah.
but they were super insistent on being like, no, we're going to Venezuela. Like, don't even try it.
They were just under the halfway point. They were like 1,200 miles from La Palma and 1,800 from Venezuela.
You know, that Anna de Meow is sending these things. It's like, oh, nothing here. Nothing suspicious. In fact, it's nothing at all.
In fact, why am I even sending this? End transmission.
True. And, you know, this would possibly explain the suspicious sinking of the Fausto, as well as the pages being torn out of Julio's notebook. Kind of the crew of the Anna de Meow covering up any trace that there was illegal cargo on board.
Right.
So another theory you'll see going back to the original Unresolved Mysteries Reddit post. The original poster is from the Canary Islands. And so they're saying that this theory kind of blew up in a urban legend type way. And that would be that a Nazi war criminal fleeing to South America boarded El Fausto and kind of took over.
It seems a little late to me for 1968, but the idea is essentially that they were hiding out in the Canary Islands, were worried that some Nazi hunters, which still were kind of a thing in the late 60s, were coming around and looking for him. And then he decided to basically stow away on El Fausto and hold up the crew at gunpoint. Mm-hmm. It explains why they would be trying to make the trip to Venezuela. It would explain why they refused to tow. Mm-hmm. It would explain why they didn't have the supplies in order to get to Venezuela, because they weren't planning to do it.
Right, and it's interesting. There's no reports of anyone on La Duquesa boarding El Fausto, so it is possible that this Nazi war criminal was holding them all at gunpoint and kind of like hiding below deck or whatever and telling them don't ask for help, just get more fuel. So to get into specifics, the theory states that this Nazi was hiding in El Hierro and wanted to escape due to a specific Austrian Nazi hunter named Simon Wiesenthal. So when they first dropped off the cargo, he boarded and was like, take me to Venezuela. You know, there's obviously many cases of Nazis fleeing to South America.
Or so she's heard.
So I've heard. I mean, Mexico isn't South America. And so in a very similar vein, it seems possible that El Fausto may have been boarded by pirates, Nazi pirates or just regular pirates. It's possible that pirates had already taken over the ship, similar to what we explained with the Nazi war criminal, by the time the Duchess found them, which once again would be why they're like, no, nothing's wrong. Like, nothing's wrong here.
Yeah.
It's been speculated that pirates or possibly the Nazi war criminal could have killed the crew or killed 3 of the members, leaving 1 behind to help with kind of the boat and to help get them to South America. This doesn't really make sense, though, to me, because from all accounts, it's presumed that the body was Julio's, and Julio had no experience with El Fausto or with boating.
Or could it have been, and this is supported by nothing, when the boat set off while they were under gunpoint from the Nazi war criminal, they decided to convert the ship into a Nazi pirate boat. which is, we're going to go ahead and say just trademark on that. And they took another boat that was in the Atlantic Ocean and took that crew over, and then brought the 3 sailors who actually knew how to sail from El Fausto onto the new boat, still at gunpoint of the Nazi, and then made them all go to Venezuela, leaving poor Julio behind.
Oh, yeah, because he wasn't useful.
Because there was no use for him. He couldn't help with the boat.
Interesting. And, they call it a Nazi party, but I'm not having fun.
I think the only problem I have with the entire Nazi or a general war criminal line of theories is that, in my experience, life isn't a comic book.
Damn.
So it doesn't really read to me that this sort of thing would happen.
On one hand, it would be hard if it was a single Nazi war criminal to kind of stick up an entire cargo boat capable of crossing the Atlantic. But on the other hand, you think pirates or a Nazi would be aware that this little fishing boat probably wouldn't be able to take them to Venezuela. I don't know. I don't think it makes much sense. The stick-upper still needs to eat too. Why would he be on this boat that only has fruit and water? It doesn't make much sense to me.
My superior Arian, I will be able to drink this seawater. Oh no. Oh, that's not good at all. Maybe now. Oh no.
Damn, was that supposed to be an impression of my dad? No homo. My grandparents actually met in Germany, but
oh wow.
But no, they were in the U.S. Army.
And the first beautiful romantic first words your grandfather said to your grandmother was, "You ever wonder what it would be like if things went different?"
Oh my God. So another theory could be that the crew themselves were trying to escape to Venezuela. The men may have wanted to escape to South America to start a new life. Venezuela seemed to have a growing economy. They were living under Franquista rule. I don't know about this, though, because, Viterbo wasn't there. None of them brought their family. I don't think Julio would have been all right with that.
Yeah, it seems really strange that they'd pick that night to head out to Venezuela. And also their families were behind. They each had 4 to 6 kids and a wife. Mm-hmm. They weren't doing bad economically. But the sad thing is, according to the journalist who put the book together, apparently the families are hopeful that somehow they did make it to Venezuela and that's where they are. That's the theory that they choose to believe. And I understand that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That is very tragic. The lack of food and fuel are an obstacle to this theory. However, as we mentioned, with the possibility that they were smuggling illegal items to Venezuela, if they were trying to escape and start a new life in Venezuela, the men may have met with a larger vessel in the Atlantic Ocean. Of course, there's really no evidence of this, but it's the Atlantic Ocean. I guess it's possible.
It's pretty big.
Also, escaping to Venezuela doesn't really make sense. It's strange to say, but by the 60s, things were actually kind of going all right in Spain. The economy was picking up.
And it's thanks in large part to bumbling, cross-eyed white Americans coming over, just like myself, being like, this seems like a nice place to spend our honeymoon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Franco was pushing the tourism. So another theory, though, was that El Fausto could have possibly seen something that they were not supposed to see. They could have had a run-in with a Cold War sub. In the 60s, Spain is getting those tourist bucks. America and the USSR were engaging in the Cold War.
It is known that there were a lot of subs operating in that part of the Atlantic and basically everywhere in the Atlantic during all of the 1960s.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The Atlantic Ocean, especially the North Atlantic Ocean, was absolutely infested with American and Soviet nuclear submarines. So it's thought that perhaps El Fausto came across a U.S. versus USSR cage match with submarines.
The against and the for would be that the Ana de Miau reported that the ship wasn't damaged. So if it hit a submarine or was even torpedoed, there didn't seem to be any damage. But on the other hand, there is reason to believe that the crew of the Anomalous didn't actually do a thorough inspection, because the ship clearly had something going on with it if it, for seemingly no other reason, it sunk bow first while being towed.
That's exactly right. There are people who say, it capsized due to the speed and disparity in size between the ships. But I don't think the Anomalous did a very thorough job in checking for damage. It seems that, just looking at the boat in the water, it's not like blown to bits.
If it was hit by a torpedo, we wouldn't have found anything. It could have been hit by a torpedo that didn't explode due to its tiny size, though I'm not certain at all why any sub on either side of the Cold War would torpedo El Fausto.
Well, a lot of suspicious shit was happening, I think.
You're just like, let me tell you a couple of things about white guys.
No, I mean, so the thought is that they witnessed something they weren't supposed to witness. I will also say that just months earlier, the USS Scorpion had been sunk in a location that was fairly close to where El Fausto disappeared, and it is believed that the USS Scorpion was sunk due to a Soviet attack. I wasn't able to get specifics, so, when you're saying relatively close to the point El Fausto disappeared, and you're talking relative to the Atlantic Ocean.
I mean, relatively close is just a completely meaningless phrase. The light switch that turns off the light when Maddie's watching TV is relatively close to the couch. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't ask me to turn it off.
I'll be like, oh, can you? And then I'll say, never mind. So I don't force you to turn off the light.
Yeah, but that does force me to go, what is it?
An object at rest tends to stay at rest.
An object walking past the living room to go to the kitchen is not on a trajectory to hit the light switch.
Like we said, though, there were a lot of submarines carousing. No?
You know what? It's close enough, and it's kind of a fun version of cruising.
Carousing the area. So it's possible. To me, of course, like with all these theories, there are things that don't line up. Why they would have just hit them with one single torpedo and it didn't sink the ship. Because obviously El Fausto was able to drift for months and very far. So why they wouldn't make sure the boat was completely exploded still doesn't necessarily explain what happened to the crew. But it is possible. And, it's like I said, at the USSR and the US, we're doing some shady things and covering up a lot of stuff, as they do.
The most believable version for me of this completely unbelievable theory is maybe there was some operation going on that had to do with the Soviet and U.S. operations in the area. Like there was a recovery effort going on to get the Scorpion back. And El Fausto was off course again and just in the wrong place at the wrong time and got CIA black-sighted, basically.
That's fair. That's interesting. I don't know. There's still a lot of things that I think we both agree that don't add up.
Definitely. So we've brought you through all of the additional theories, trying to explain some of the unanswered questions. One of my favorite settings for these kind of mysteries, we covered several episodes ago, the Mary Celeste. It's just really interesting how these ships lost at sea often don't get a second chance. And El Fausto was given a second chance. And it really opens up to a lot of these more out there theories trying to answer the question of why they didn't get help. So that's our episode for this couple of weeks. You can reach out to us on all sorts of social media at an Anomalous Podcast. Let us know what you're thinking. We'll be sharing a couple photos of maps so you can sort of visualize how far off track they had really gotten and how deeply lost in the Atlantic they had become.
Yeah, for sure. Follow us on Instagram at an Anomalous Podcast.
We have a TikTok. We also have a Twitter that's used now and again.
We are gearing up for season 2. We're getting our shit together. We're planning some things out, but we would really love if you reach out to us, give us any suggestions.
Just a tiny little operation here. Myself, just Cullen, Spooky Maddie, Danny DeVito, who at some point here will...
Hey, I'm the penguin.
who at some point here will have the confidence to interject something.
Yeah, I offered him the mic. He was like, oh, not today.
Danny DeVito sounds nothing like that. So join us back here in a couple of weeks for a new episode of Anomalous. I'm going to say believe in 4 dads just out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, knowing that they're lost, but they're still having fun with it. And believe in yourself.
Believe in cracking up on a cold one with the boys, but Kraken is like the squid monster.
Oh yeah.
And believe in yourself. Believe in that joke that was like a guy is lost at sea and then a helicopter comes, finds him, and then he's like, no, God will save me. And then a boat comes, finds him, is like, God will save me. And then he dies, and then he gets to heaven, and he's like, God, why didn't you save me? And he said, I sent you a boat and a helicopter. So
that's a very, very, very sad joke.
Yeah, as I was in the middle of saying it, I was like, what's funny about this?
Yeah, there's not a funny part. That's what we call a Catholic goof, where it's just sort of sad.
It's not funny. It's
depressing.
Sad.
The cruelty of the world.
God's not going to save you.
Believe that we can defeat the force of the Nazi pirates and believe in yourself.
Believe I can defeat the ocean and believe in yourself.
Bye, everyone. See you in a couple weeks. This has been Anomalous.
Adios, putas.
Bye, bitch.
Did you know I studied abroad in España? Bitch.